All right, you ready for this?
Ready.
This is Tom Salemi. Welcome to this week's episode of the Device Talks weekly podcast. Chris Newmarker and I are in undisclosed hidden locations after our assault on Big Pumpkin last week. We're suffering some large repercussions, but we shall persevere and we will not be silenced. Right, Chris?
You know, Tom, I never knew people had such strong opinions about pumpkins. It's scary, man. It's scary.
I know. I'm seeing like pumpkins left out on doorsteps all around my neighborhood. I think it has to be a message, right? People are letting us know that Big Pumpkin is listening.
Yeah, I know. That's the biggest thing to worry about is Big Pumpkin. That's just totally.
No pumpkin beer, no pumpkin brats. Let's move on. All right.
No pumpkin left behind.
Before we get into this week's episode, I did want to let you know that Chris and I are going to bring this level of levity and jocularity to Device Talks Tuesdays. Coming up on this Tuesday, we're going to get to interview Jeff Karp, who's a really cool innovator at, he's at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. He also has his own lab, the Karp Lab. And you should definitely sit on this. Jeff is coming in with no PowerPoint. He just wants to talk about innovation, and more directly, he wants to speak to the ability to overcome failure in innovation. So Jeff's pretty honest about bad news he's received and ways that he's worked around it, and I think it's certainly an important lesson for this time.
Totally. He's such a great communicator too, and every time I hear about something that he's doing, it's really cool. So this should be a really good talk.
Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to that conversation. He's really an interesting fellow. He's done a TED Talk, and that should be a lot of fun. We did have a great time, or I had a great time with Mick Farrell from ResMed. He was our guest on this week's Device Talks Tuesdays. If you're interested in how ResMed sort of married their medical technology and their digital health technology, you can go to devicetalks.com. We have all of those conversations on demand, so you can listen. We did not have our cameras on for that one, but there is a PowerPoint presentation that we sort of not really followed, but it's there for you. You can download that if you want to get some data from ResMed. So it was a great conversation.
Yeah, they're a real digital health pioneer. I mean, that's a really good get for.
Yeah, they really seem to get it, and they're really kind of moving it forward, moving it down the field. So and Mick's, he's just a good guy to talk to. So
yeah. So we are you ready for like the news makers for the week?
I absolutely am. We need to get you a theme song. We need to work on that. So
drum roll, maybe do I don't know. Something.
It's so much bigger than a drum roll, but all right, for now, everyone just silence yourselves and just imagine a drum roll, and then Chris will engage. Go ahead, Chris. What's number 5?
All right, here we go. Number 5, we've got Hologic. They're launching a $950 million private offering. And this comes about a week after the company boosted its financial outlook for the fourth quarter. They're really big in the COVID testing space right now. So some good news over at Hologic. Number 4, we've got Varian. They're naming a new president and COO. Their current Varian Oncology Systems president, Chris Toth, is going to be promoted in this newly created role of the company. So a little bit of change with the top management over Varian. Hey, so in the number 3 item, this should be familiar to you, Tom, because this is your story, man. This is what you wrote about Smith and Nephew, seeking a new way into the OR amid the pandemic, and how they've turned to Avail Med Systems, which is a startup that has high level telecommunications system to for operating rooms and surgery centers. So kind of like one of the big problems for medical device companies right now is it's really hard for their salespeople to get into health providers amid the pandemic. So this is kind of their Zoom, right? It's their.
Well, I think the last time I wrote on the list, I covered Avail as well, and Avail is a very interesting company. They're actually going to be the topic of a conversation we're having on Device Talks Tuesday on October 6th. I'm going to be looking at how their ability to put equipment into the OR can help better connect medical sales reps and other specialists with the surgeons who are in the OR. It's a really cool system. So go to devicetalks.com to check that out. Again, it's happening on October 6th. Now let's get into the interview part of our show. We're going to have 2 interviews for today, as we normally do. Later on, I'm thrilled to be talking to, or I've already spoken with, Leslie Trigg, the CEO of Outset Medical. Stay tuned for news on them. Leslie and I go back a bit, and it was great to reconnect on Outset. But first, I want to introduce Doug Teany. Doug is the COO of Corindus Vascular Robotics. Corindus has developed its robotic system for interventionalists, and it's able to allow an interventionalist to conduct procedures over thousands of miles using the 5G network. In fact, Corindus is the subject of a documentary that just came out this week. It's on Amazon and a few other streaming services. It's called Speed of Thought, and the documentary looks at how 5G is impacting many industries. Corindus is demonstrating how 5G could impact healthcare. So spoke with Doug about Corindus's offerings and how things might change with 5G. So let's get into this conversation with Doug Teany, the COO of Corindus Vascular Robotics. Well, Doug Teany, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Tom. Thrilled to be here.
Well, I've never talked to a web streaming star before, so I'm excited.
It's less glamorous than you think.
Oh, please. I want to talk about Speed of Thought, the documentary that came out this week and is available on Amazon and other services. But before I do, I just like our listeners to know a little bit about who we're talking to. Doug, looking at your LinkedIn profile, I see you worked at Boston Scientific, and then before that, you were at the Army Corps of Engineers. Wasn't quite sure how you found your way into the medtech industry. Was your first job at Boston Sci, or did it start before that?
No, my first job out of college was in the management consulting industry, so I made my way from there to Abbott Labs to Boston to Corindus. Yeah.
And how did you choose medtech as your path?
It was probably selected for me based on the engagements we had as a consulting firm, but I'm originally from the Midwest. Our firm we're out of Indianapolis, Indiana, so we were up at Abbott Laboratories, for most of the early part of my career doing PMO implementation for drug development. And I just fell in love with work in pharmaceuticals and then ended up doing multiple medical device engagements as a management consultant, wound up at Boston Scientific and never looked back. I was there for roughly 11 and a half years, and I still bleed blue on Boston Scientific.
I hear that's hard to get out, the Boston Scientific.
It's hard to get out.
Yeah.
I think Corindus shook it out of me. We're having a good time with a mission that we're pretty passionate about at Corindus. So it's been great. It's been a great run at Corindus so far.
That's great. So let's. I want to get into CorePath and your tech in a moment, but I do want to just understand where Corindus is at as a company, as a corporate structure. You were acquired by Siemens, very famously last year for over $1 billion. So how does Corindus now operate? Are you still Corindus? Are you Corindus Siemens? Are you a Healthineer?
We're still Corindus, and I am a Healthineer all at the same time. So what I've said about that is, when you're Corindus and you're going, year to year as a startup with an emerging technology, there are things that come with that on needing to raise funds and needing to rejigger project schedules a lot. And that acquisition by Siemens is just elevated, this whole pathway for us to the fact that, it removes that question of whether or not we'll reach the finish line as a robotics company going after remote robotics. And it provides some certainty to that because Siemens is committed to that pathway as we are at Corindus.
And just finally on the corporate side, I know Mark Tolan, the CEO, left. He's joined a very cool firm, BioStar. What does that mean for Corindus's corporate structure? What's next?
Well, Mark has been fantastic for Corindus. I've known him for a long time, back from Boston Scientific days, and we've benefited greatly from his passion and vision for remote robotics. So his last day with Corindus is October 1st. Mark and I had a strong understanding that the way to move the company forward was not through any one individual, whether it be him or me, but to create strong relationships with physicians and now leverage the power of Siemens Healthineers. So, we're moving forward, and Mark's helped set that up, and we're thrilled to have had him and wish him luck on what he's doing next.
And you mentioned your experience at Boston Sci, so you've worked in a large company before. Is this a place you'll be for a time?
That's the plan. It's working out really well for us at Corindus. We've been Siemens is a large company with a tremendous engineering team and, deep assets in imaging. And those are all things that we need to make the vision a reality. So we've got a good working rhythm with Siemens right now. They are, we're pulling in engineers as we need them for projects, and they're allowing us to still have a strong voice in the vision and how work gets done. So it's a perfect marriage in my mind.
Let's talk about CorePath. So tell us a bit about the tech. I mean, you're an interventional surgical robotic tool, so you've got a different focus than a lot of the other surgical robotic companies. What does CorePath do, and why is there a need for it? What drives the need for interventional robotics?
So the current iteration of our CorePath TRX system is focused on local robotics. So you remove the physician out of the radiation field and deliver to that physician everything that comes with the robotic system. So we're able to automate parts of the procedure. We're able to do high device fixation. We're able to offer precision movements that you can't replicate with a human hand. And then as they set in what we call the interventional cockpit with CorePath TRX, we've put a 40-inch monitor, a foot in front of the physician. So you get visualization capabilities that you just can't get reaching across the table. Mm-hmm. So what I focus on when I talk about what CorePath brings to physicians is that precision medicine, just the ability to fix devices, to move in micro movements. We can move and hold devices in sub-millimeter level accuracy. And we're making a lot of progress at studying what physicians do to overcome vascular challenges and then replicating that in the robotic system and making those movements available for everyone who uses a robotic system.
I always saw our interventional procedures as being that's obviously a skill set, a skilled job, but also it just seems like it's a lot of intuition, sort of a lot of, I guess, human feel and human touch. Is that something that is that true? Number one, I'm not an interventionist, so I don't know if that's true or not. But number two, if so, how do you kind of replicate that with the robotic experience?
It's great you ask it that way, because we've got a long-term vision for incorporating AI into interventional procedures and doing prescriptive analytics and replicating techniques. And we've always said the best AI in the near term is what physicians have in their head. And they are very skilled at what they do. It becomes very intuitive for them. And I tell anyone who asks, they're sort of like a natural athlete. They just do it without thinking. So from our perspective, we take a very, focused engineering view, and we watch thousands of cases, and we break video down. We try to see where physicians struggle and where robotics could help. And we have an innovation model that we use called outcome-driven innovation, which essentially looks at what is a physician doing today that's not going well for them, and how do they want it to go? And that's the sweet spot for us to come in with a robotic solution. So there's a combination of pulling out of their heads and experience what they know and what they do in challenging cases. And it's combined with delivering a robotic system that can really amplify what they can do with their hands with the precision component.
And how have you been received by the interventional community?
I think fantastically. We've got, a number of, key opinion leader accounts that are helping us build the field. We're dependent on steering committees and physician advisors to guide us on where robotics needs to go. And I think if, with physicians that have the right vision, they understand what's possible when we look at our out years on our tech roadmap with remote robotics and automation, and they're very engaged today to both complete cases safely and to help build that future.
Looking at the past year, this is a question I'm asking everyone. How has COVID? How did it impact your year or change your year?
Well, we've had to figure out how to move capital hardware projects forward in a virtual way. Mm-hmm. So, there's a little adjustment to COVID, but we've hit a nice rhythm of scheduling lab time, of working with physicians virtually. So it's gone well. But I think the bigger storyline for me on COVID is where we want to go with remote robotics. Mm-hmm. So, telemedicine has been greatly accelerated. And this concept of having a video consult with a physician used to be foreign to people. I feel like it's becoming an acceptable standard of care at this point. And that acceptance and that infrastructure that's being built around diagnostic telemedicine is the platform that will enable us to launch remote robotics, because to transition from diagnosing a patient to treating a patient, you just need to extend that physician controls. And so we think it's a good thing what's happened with telemedicine. And if there's any silver lining on the dark COVID cloud, it's that there are some advancements that are happening in medicine that are going to be good for patients.
And to be clear, when you're talking about the diagnostic, you're talking about reading imaging over your computer, not telehealth where you're talking to your doctor on a FaceTime.
No, I think I'm talking about both. If you think about, the stroke diagnostic network today exists where a neurointerventionalist can talk to a patient, determine if they're having a stroke, and then get them routed for care. If we were able to treat that patient at the same time they're diagnosing that stroke occurring, there's great benefits for the patient.
Good. I'm glad you clarified that. Second part of my question is just the rise of ASCs, ambulatory surgery centers. Is that something that is impacting you as well, or is that a different class of procedure?
It's a different class of procedure with peripheral and coronary interventions from where we're going with stroke, but it's very relevant for us. Looking at where physicians practice and how we have to consider robotics fitting into those contexts are something that we study closely. There's nothing disruptive about ambulatory centers coming into play. It's just a matter of studying workflow, understanding the patient population they'll be treating, and then adjusting our playbook for that. So we watch it closely. We're responding to that. But from a perspective of where Corindus is going, focused on neurovascular interventions and stroke, there still are a very limited number of centers around the world and in the United States where you can get treated. So it's not a trend we see with where we're moving for the future.
But is that, and let's move into the more telesurgery discussion, because that's what the Speed of Thought documentary is really focusing on, your ability to have, you had a surgeon who performed procedures over the 5G network. Where does telesurgery fit into our future healthcare system, and what shortfalls does it help overcome?
Yeah, so when I've talked about this in the past, I reference some heart attack data and some stroke data. Mm-hmm. So if you are to have a heart attack today, you have roughly 90 minutes before you're going to be faced with death or permanent disability to get into a hospital. 80% of the U.S. population lives within an hour of the center that can treat them. So for most of us, that's a fine place to be, but we think it ought to be closer to 100% these days. There's no reason that we shouldn't have that care available for everyone, and you do not want to be in that 20% that doesn't have a treatment facility. So remote robotics closes that gap. It essentially takes a developed coronary market and heart attack market and provides access to everyone despite your location, despite how rural you may be. Stroke is a different story. Minutes matter.
Right.
If you roughly lose 10 minutes of having blood flow reestablished in the brain after a stroke, you lose a month to 40 days of a disability-free lifetime. So an hour and a half delay on getting a stroke treated is loss of 1 year of disability-free life. Most of the transport times to get to a stroke center are 2 to 4 hours. So you're 2 years off the top of losing disability-free lifetime after the stroke event. And so remote robotics plays a significant role there, that if a patient who has the onset of a stroke symptom can get treated at the first hospital they arrive to and not be rerouted to a hospital that can take care of them, you're adding years to people's lives, and you're literally doubling their chance of an independent life afterwards and taking billions out of the U.S. and global healthcare system on long-term care costs. If we can treat patients sooner, everybody wins.
What does that solution look like? Because you're, I think, essentially anticipating or hoping or projecting that smaller hospitals will be buying CorePath and having them in place to help these patients. Yet those are also the hospitals that can least afford big capital items like this. How do you overcome that?
Well, Dr. Ryan Mader talks about that in the film, where he says, it occurred to him that if he's able to do a robotic case 10 feet away from the table, why not farther? And so we've kind of pushed that on what we can do with telecommunications companies like Verizon, and have discovered that we are able to extend the reach of the physician from from the cath lab to a different room, to a different building, to even outside the state, as we demonstrate on the 5G documentary. So for us, it opens up. I think with long-term capital planning, any hospital system can plan for the appropriate network and the appropriate capital budget to afford a robotic system. And if we're clear with hospitals and physicians about how to prepare for this technology when it's ready, we think it will have significant uptake because it's patient-driven, and they're in the business of taking care of patients. And the motivations are all aligned. And it's one of those few technologies where everybody's on the same side of the fence about getting to market, so we can close some of these gaps.
Have we figured out the financials yet? Because that's what got in the way of telehealth. Not payers not willing to pay for that FaceTime call. Do we know if the interventionalist is at Mass General Hospital in Boston and the core path is out 2 hours away? Who gets paid for that procedure?
Well, it's what we're working on now.
Yeah.
So we think that there is additional reimbursement that will be available for patient benefit because of the outcomes that we have, but that's very much a work in progress. And how physicians will work with partner hospitals and how payments will flow is probably something I'm not ready to comment on. We've got work.
You haven't figured that out yet, Doug? Come on.
No, but it's a good question because it's really important to figure out, because we'll tell folks that we think we've got the technology, understood. There's a lot of development work to make it reliable, to make it safe, to build confidence in what we're doing. And there will be some clinical data that we'll need to collect to demonstrate that. So we're now dealing with all the surrounding questions as part of our development project on reimbursement, liability.
Yeah.
Intra and extra hospital relationships and how that's going to work. So it will need to be sorted by the time we finish the project, but it's not sorted today.
Oh, that's a great point. I mean, I may be wrong in my projection. I said that I put the interventionalist at Mass General Hospital, but maybe they're at a remote site that is in a strip mall someplace, and they just need access to a 5G network and a computer, and they can perform procedures anywhere.
Yeah, to temper the excitement that people tend to think about with what you can do with remote robotics, we always say we should be connecting one qualified healthcare center to another. Okay. Our view of the initial deployment, this would not something that we envision a physician doing from their house or from their
in their jammies. You don't see that happening.
Yeah, we don't. I think it's from hospital to hospital or from appropriate center to hospital.
All right. Well, then I'll remain a podcaster. Then it gives me that flexibility. And anything else we should know about Corindus? What's next? You've got the applications in coronary vascular and neurovascular interventions. Are you moving into any new areas that you can talk about or new technologies?
Well, the focus is absolutely on remote robotics, and then after that on stroke. And the out years of our technology roadmap are focused on bringing autonomous navigation to interventional procedures, on bringing more data and AI capabilities. And I think our long-term view is if we have a remote robotic system where a patient can be treated when they need it, wherever they are in the world, if that supports a physician with data-driven decision support and the ability to automate components of the case, it comes together into a robust and commercially viable solution. So I think the out years for us are very interesting, and we're looking at very similar to how the automotive industry thinks about autonomous navigation. We're thinking about autonomous navigation within the blood vessels in the body.
That's outstanding. All right. Well, it's very exciting stuff. Congratulations on being part of the documentary. I'm sure folks will check out Speed of Thought on Amazon and other channels. And thanks again for joining us on the podcast. It's been great to talk to you.
You're welcome, Tom. Thank you very much.
Well, that was a really good interview. So Tom, you ready for the number 2?
I am, man. Bring us the El Duo.
Well, this is actually kind of grim. There's authorities in Germany are investigating whether a hospital ransomware attack might have resulted in a negligent homicide. So, I mean, when it comes to healthcare and cybersecurity, stuff's getting real. Wow. What happened was this hospital in Dusseldorf had a major attack on their IT system about a week ago, and a woman who needed life-saving treatment, she had to be taken to another hospital in the area, and she died amid the delay. it's interesting too, because the media, a lot of the media reports are saying that this might be the first time that a hospital site cyber attack has caused a death.
That's the other side of the coin, isn't it? When we talk about tele this and tele that there's always a threat of someone nefarious getting in and causing harm. So that's really tragic. Terrible to hear.
And I know, for years, covering the industry, I mean, you hear all the time about cybersecurity being a concern in medtech, but I wonder, it's going to be really interesting to see, how much more of a priority that this becomes now that, we've actually got somebody is potentially dead because, something didn't work out.
Well, that certainly is a tragic story, and that's something that we'll need to track. So, well, now this time for the number one story, Chris. Let's hear what was the most popular story on MassDevice this week.
Well, the number one story, this for a change is actually some good news. We've got Outset Medical's IPO. They raised nearly $278 million. Really good to see a good medtech IPO going on here.
Well, this is a crazy coincidence, Chris, because I just happened to have an interview here with Leslie Trigg, the CEO of Outset Medical, and Leslie talks about their move in dialysis. When I first met her a few years ago, Outset had really, I think, a far less ambitious goal. Still would have been a much greater improvement over dialysis. But in this conversation, Leslie's going to talk about how Outset sort of saw a bigger solution that it could provide. And it's a great story. And also we'll talk about the IPO itself. It was an interesting experience. Leslie said it wasn't quite the experience that she was anticipating when she would eventually take a company public because of COVID. But in the end, she realized the value of it. And going forward, she's of the mind that in-person roadshows may not be necessary anymore. So that'll be interesting.
Wow.
There's some good stories there about investors and their toddlers. So all right, well, let's hear this.
Sounds great. Let's go.
All right, so let's hear this conversation with Leslie Trigg, the CEO of Outset Medical. Well, Leslie Trigg, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Congratulations on the IPO. That's great news for Outset and for MedTech.
Thank you. Yeah, we were really, really excited for the team. I mean, this was definitely a team victory.
I want to get into Outset's story in a minute, but first I want to hit upon the transaction. So you raised over $250 million, and we can get into the details in a moment. There's been some discussion about whether you could have raised more because the stock has done so well post-IPO. How are you looking at this whole IPO process, and what do you say to those who suggest that you could have raised more capital through this transaction?
Well, I think our goals were first and foremost to raise the amount of capital that we felt was required to really take advantage of the market opportunity ahead of us. So getting the capital in was goal number one. Goal number two was the quality of the investor syndicate. We were very, very focused on getting really the best and highest quality investors in the world around the company to match the quality of the investors that we had in the private syndicate, right? We have always had the benefit, and we're very grateful for it, of having kind of premier investors like Fidelity and T. Rowe and Partner Fund, Perceptive Advisors, et cetera, around the company in its private stage. So, with those two goals in mind, getting adequate capital raised and through a very high quality syndicate that we feel will continue to support the company, through thick and thin, the valuation for us certainly was important. But the way we thought about it was striking the right balance between a return profile that made our existing investors feel really good about it and a return profile that would make our new investors feel really good about it, so that it felt like a win-win for all involved. Whether we hit that mark, anybody can speculate about that. I think from our vantage point, getting it done at the raise amount required to fuel the business with the quality of the investor syndicate that we were able to attract and at a valuation that we feel, or we've heard, from a broad array of investors, we felt like we hit on all three marks.
So that's a great point about bringing in the right investors, because I mean it's long been said that IPOs for medtech and life sciences companies aren't really exiting opportunities. They're aren't liquidity rather. They're more of a financing strategy, and then certainly some exiting can happen. But as a company that will be around for a long time and now is on the public markets, how do you look at that investor base going forward? How much control do you have or want to have over sort of the types of firms that you're working with? Is it completely different than it was when you were raising private capital, or are you still want to make sure you have the right people sitting around the table?
I think our approach was very similar to the strategy that we pursued as a private company.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is that there is just a more limited universe of public market investors that also invest privately. So we were always going after investors who had a very long-term mindset, who had a swing for the fences attitude, and who trusted the management team to pursue it in a really bold fashion, sort of a bold, fearless fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Those three attributes were exactly the same as those that we applied during the allocation process. The difference is that we now had a broader universe of investors that could invest in Outset as a public company. But the emphasis on quality, and again, we defined quality against the three attributes that I just alluded to, that we never wavered from that. And because we know that, the aspiration here is really big. This is not just introducing a new device. We're trying to change the sort of the whole fundamental landscape of when and where and how dialysis is delivered. That is still not for the faint of heart, and we very much are just getting going. This is not really the end of the book. It is the beginning. And so I still felt very strongly that we needed to attract the same types of investors, long-term minded, swing for the fences, and supportive of a strategy that will be very bold in both its ambition and the way that we execute against it.
Let's talk a bit about the roadshow. And we're all talking about Zoom nowadays and how it's fitting into our lives. I know these roadshows are getting condensed down into less than a week from several weeks before. How did that? Well, number one, do you feel like you missed out on that I guess experience, as dreadful as it sounds, of taking a company public through the prior ways? And in answering that, I suppose let's talk a little bit about what the process was like taking this story forward.
Sure. I'm not going to lie. I grieved that a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe early in the process, when it became abundantly clear that it was going to be via Zoom, and that there was absolutely nothing we were going to be able to do about that, particularly when it started to involve a 14-day quarantine entering New York from California. That was probably the final nail in the coffin. I was still holding out hope very late in the game that we could do it in person, but not because we wanted it or I wanted it as a life experience. I think just because I'm still very old-fashioned. I'm old enough to be old-fashioned in the sense that I still believe that an in-person presence in developing relationships, and that's what we're doing here. We're trying to not sell IPO shares. We're trying to develop long-term relationships with investors that we want in and around Outset for a very, very long time. And so I am old-fashioned in believing that relationship development is best done in person. However, I grieved it and we moved on. And then, thought about ways that we could utilize Zoom to create the closest possible in-person experience. So for example, and this is just very tactical and practical, we decided not to do our roadshow meetings in a big boardroom. Mm-hmm. Because in a big boardroom with three of us sitting there, we would have had less of an opportunity to really have face-to-face contact because we would have been so far away. And then for somebody looking at our slides, we're even further away because our boardroom shot is in a tiny tile in the upper right-hand corner. So we would really look like dots on a screen. So for example, we made the decision for the three of us to all be in different offices within Outset, mm-hmm. so that we could have kind of a close-up shot of our faces, and so that people could try to get a little bit better sense, of our personalities through facial expressions and then the interaction we were having with one another. Two, I was actually really happy with the number of investors who were also on camera. I was wondering about that, and I really, credit the investors for making that, not only the investment of their time, but in making sure that they were showing up visually as well. So I guess I would say at the end of the day, I actually probably wouldn't have done it any differently. I really liked it. And I heard, I think it was Adina Friedman at NASDAQ, make some comments about, hey, maybe we never go back to in-person roadshow. And I would endorse that. And it's not just about not having to travel. I think we were able to achieve the same objectives. I think we were able to establish the relationship development piece virtually. And of course, relationship development happens over time. It's not, it's not a one-time interaction. It's going to occur over time, and also as we earn the trust and credibility against our own performance.
I'd love to find out how you did that, how you got a read of the people on the other side of the screen. And I almost wonder whether COVID is kind of a great equalizer. I mean, this is all a great shared experience we have. We all have stories to tell. We've all had animals and pets and kids wander through screens and stuff like that. I mean, did that kind of come into play that we're all in this large global pandemic together, and that sort of kind of breaks the ice a little bit?
Absolutely. It definitely humanized each of us, both on the management team and the various investor teams. We always took a few minutes to, as we were waiting for everybody to assemble, oh, where are you calling in from? Oh, where are you? And oh, you're in the attic. Oh, what's that you doing now? That's interesting. What room are you? Now, are you doing some work in the back there? Or
yeah.
And then, pets would wander in. We had, and I won't name names. I mean, we definitely had numerous toddlers, jumping on investors' laps, and that none of that would have happened in the coterie of anonymous conference rooms.
Right.
We would have walked in. Nice to meet you. Here's my background. Let me give you the pitch on Outset, and we're off. So yeah, there was it lent itself to definitely more personal interaction, which for me at least gave me a much better sense of who the person was under the name of the investment fund.
That's great. No, that's a great point. And yeah, you're right. When you're going from conference room to conference room, I'm sure they all blend together after 2 or 3 weeks. I think you probably are able to remember, oh yeah, that's the person who had the really neat painting behind them or something like that.
I remember every single person we met with. Every single person. Definitely aided by those that were on camera for sure. But I remember very specific details. We were in one meeting and we had talked to this individual, this particular fund, many times, maybe 3 times. And I felt comfortable because he was always in the same place in his living room, and I had a sense of comfort because I knew the paint color, and and he had like a particular molding on the. And, it's almost like you're being invited back into somebody's home, and quite literally we were.
That's great. Who were the other 2 people on the call representing Outset?
I was joined by Rebecca Chambers, our CFO, and then also Chad Hoskins, who's the GM of our newly formed home business, and also our Vice President of Strategy.
Excellent. Well, that's a good segue. I wanted to talk a bit about Outset. I think when you and I met, we were at a Heartland Summit probably 5 or 6 years ago when you first started at Outset. Outset at the time, if I remember correctly, was very much, we're going to take dialysis out of the larger clinics and make it more friendly, maybe in the back of a CVS, something more approachable for people. Now you've really advanced that idea and that goal to bring it at home, at least as part of your business. I wonder what has transpired over that time. Did you see that there was a greater need for what Tableau would provide, or did technology advance more quickly than perhaps was initially understood, and it allowed you to do more than you wanted to do? What has transpired from when you took the role of CEO to now, where you're, again, offering much more than I think we were talking about at the time? Well,
I think the number one thing that changed is I was lucky enough to attract some extremely smart people to the team who saw things and believed in a vision that was much, much bigger, to your point, than even I had originally imagined. And so as this kind of bigger, bolder ambition took shape, it wasn't actually so much about including the home. It was even bigger than that. And so what we started to realize, again, and I truly credit a few members of the team in particular here who kind of opened our eyes to what could be achieved. It expanded into what we ended up calling and describing to investors as an enterprise solution for dialysis. And the reason why we say that is because if you look at health systems, whether it's a nonprofit health system, for-profit, national, big regional health systems, they do have to deliver dialysis across their enterprise. They are delivering dialysis in the ICU and on the floor of the hospital, and oftentimes they'll own a rehab facility or a skilled nursing facility or an outpatient dialysis clinic, a home program, or all of the above. So they've got this sort of like enterprise cost problem associated with dialysis. And what I think the big aha moment was realizing that we could develop a technology that could be delivered, as we say, sort of anywhere, anytime, that would enable health systems and providers to down select just to one machine. And that's the part that has not actually been done before. The dialysis equipment that has been developed and implemented in the past has been really, really safe and effective mostly for one type of treatment. You have one machine that principally just does 3 or 4 hour treatments. You've got another machine that principally just does 24-hour treatments in the ICU. You've got one machine that principally just does home. And so an analogy we used with a lot with investors on the roadshow is that a lot of the machines were sort of one blade of the Swiss Army knife, and the technology vision evolved to, hey, let's try to build the Swiss Army knife. And you could do that, then you would really simplify the complexity of dialysis from the health system point of view. You could really simplify that by enabling them to down select to one device platform, one hardware platform, and then again provide an enterprise solution, kind of same device, whether it's being used in the ICU or at home, which is going to provide a lot of operating efficiency and cost reduction. So that's really the principal way in which the vision evolved.
And I love the term aha moment, and that's sort of where I was going to go with my question. Was there actually a moment where that happened, where you saw a PowerPoint slide, or perhaps you were driving to work or walking the dog or whatever you might have been doing, where it sort of just all came to light? Or was this kind of a more gradual realization at the true opportunity you were facing?
Well, I won't mention the name of the hospital, but yes, one thing that comes to mind, and our SVP of sales, Jamie Lewis, was just reminding me of this. She had championed this idea for a long time with great tenacity to her, which for anybody who knows Jamie won't be surprised to hear that. So she sent me to a hospital. She's like, "You're not getting it. You're not getting it." And so she sent me to a hospital. I won't name the hospital. And what I saw there, I saw just all these different machines all over the hospital. They all required, one had to be connected to like a water treatment room. One was requiring like hundreds of bags of dialysate fluid in order to be operated. Then I saw like some required portable water purification equipment to operate. And I saw, 2 nurses required to like move this equipment down the hospital hallways, and it could barely fit in the patient room. And so having seen all this, she reminded me just the other night that I sent her an email and it was just the subject line. And it was 3 words. And I don't remember doing this, but it probably was my aha moment. I emailed her and I said, "I get it."
And she's printed that out, I'm sure.
Well, she actually said she printed it out.
I would have, for sure. That's great. That's a great story. Thank you for sharing that. Final question. We asked about COVID's impact on the roadshow. I'm curious about COVID's impact on your future. I know you have to be careful about projecting and such, but just overall, has the way that healthcare is changing, have the reluctance of people to go into clinical settings, has that opened up opportunities for Outset and Tablo going forward?
Well, I think that there will probably be some long-term tailwinds here in several directions. So first and foremost, there is, and hospital executives and health systems have been very public about this, I think obviously there's going to be an even greater focus on restoration of operating margin and how do we get a rationalized P&L post-COVID. For many hospitals where elective procedure volume may not be as predictable, those growth rates may or may not be as predictable as they once were, a focus on cost reduction might just offer a lot more certainty to improvement on operating margin. And I think most, if not all, hospitals are going to continue, a march toward better operating margins and a financial recovery. And Tablo offers a solution, a vehicle through which they can do that in the cost reduction for their dialysis programs. So that's one tailwind. The other one on the patient front is perhaps the one that you just alluded to. I think there's no question that, and even outside of dialysis, I think the COVID experience for all of us has made us think twice about being in, crowded healthcare environments, and perhaps, encourage many of us to think more and maybe desire more to be treated at home for any condition. And so I think the trend is certainly bigger than dialysis, but it encompasses dialysis. And we do believe that dialysis patients will likely have an even greater incentive and perhaps speak with an even louder voice about their desire to dialyze at home. And of course, we believe with an easier and more accessible technology, we're able to enable that for people, open up the envelope for the patient population, expand the aperture for the number of people who can really use a dialysis machine in their own home successfully and safely.
Well, great stuff. Thank you again for your time. Congratulations again on the IPO, and thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Thanks a lot, Tom. I really appreciate it. And we feel like we're just getting started. It's great to have the additional capital, and we're an ambitious group, so we're going to not stop trying to raise the bar. So I appreciate you taking the time to learn more about it.
All right, well, it was great to connect with Leslie Trigg, and I hope everyone enjoyed the earlier conversation with Doug Teany of Corindus Vascular Robotics. And Chris Newmarker, it's always a great day that I get to spend some podcast time with you. So thanks for compiling this very impressive
always a pleasure.
Top 5. And please do tell our listeners, how can they find you, Chris Newmarker, on social media?
Hey, you can find me on LinkedIn, Chris Newmarker, just like a new marker. And you can find me on Twitter @Newmarker. Always happy to talk.
And I am also on LinkedIn, Tom Salemi, making lots of great connections there. Thanks to everyone who has reached out. And you can find me on the Twitter machine @MedTechTom. All right. And once again, if you are going to connect with us on LinkedIn, feel free to send your email. We will include you on a Zoom invitation to our call next week. Chris and I record these very hilarious introductions and podcasts via Zoom, and we'd be happy to have you on the call as well. So if you just want to hang out for a bit, have some fun, talk MedTech, please do send us your email address via LinkedIn. And we'll make sure you're on the invite, and it'll be some crazy kind of fun. Chris, what do you think?
So, Tom, if no one shows up, I mean, are you going to take it personally? Are you going to be like, no one wants to hang out with us?
I will actually think much more highly of our audience if they.
Yeah,
I have to say, you know what? These people know their priorities. But
they're gonna be like, I don't need to hang out with these clowns. I got stuff to do here.
I'm gonna hear all about it on Friday. Why do I have to sit through it? But it would be fun to connect to folks. But so please do reach out on LinkedIn, on Twitter. Please do share this podcast with your friends. I'm getting lots of great positive comments from folks for the podcast. Last week's podcast went extremely well, one of our most popular. And as I tell people, please, on LinkedIn, please share, please tell your friends, because we'd love to have more people listening, and we'd really like to grow this Device Talks weekly community. So, all right, well, that is a wrap. Thanks again for joining us on this week's Device Talks weekly podcast. Tune in next week. We'll have another great Newmarker Newsmakers list and a couple of great interviews from leaders in the medtech industry.
Big Ten football in a month. OH.
What does that even mean? I think we're good. Go get your sandwich.